Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome everyone to IE26 Engineering Economy. And today, inshallah, we'll talk about the annual worth analysis, which is chapter 6 in our textbook. We have covered previously in chapter 5 the present worth analysis, and we have seen all the techniques that we use to convert all the values in the cash flow to a present worth, and then we can decide whether this project we go with or we compare it to other alternative or we say no to the project. And then we have learned also about the capitalized cost when the project that life it is lasts for infinity. Then we use the technique of capitalized cost. Today we'll continue with the same concept but in a different application in chapter 6. Chapter 6 is easier compared to chapter 5 in terms of the application, in terms of the even the making the decisions at the end when you find the results. Annual worth in general, it is more applicable in real life. People more prefer chapter 6 application, which is the annual worth application, compared to chapter 5. There is no need for LCM. You remember the least common multiple, which is مضاعف مشترك أصغر. We don't need it here anymore. If you have different alternatives and they are in different life years, you can calculate each one based on the given years. There is no need for the LCM. You can still use the study period in the annual worth, and the good thing about it is give you the sense of how is my commitment every year to the project or to the investment or to the loan that I have taken from the bank, and instead of just comparing to all the values to the liquidity for time zero. So if we say when we use chapter 5 and when we use chapter 6, when we use the present, when we use the annual, this is a common question comes, not an exam. I mean, people think about it or students think about it. Annual worth comparing to present worth. Imagine you want to start your investment, okay? And you want to find the liquidity needed for that investment that is going to last for, let's say, 20 years. That is present worth analysis application. But if you want to calculate or find the annual commitment for a project or for investment, regardless of the liquidity you have now, that is annual worth analysis application. So it depends on how you see the project or the investment. If you want to calculate the annual commitment, ايش معنى annual commitment؟ الالتزام السنوي, and that is the chapter 6 annual worth analysis. If you want to calculate or find the liquidity, سيولة, the capital for now to make the decision whether yes or no, I have enough capital to start this project, then chapter 5 application will help you more, okay? So this is just to compare the present and the annual. In terms of the calculation, all what we used to do in chapter 5, converting all the values to present, now we are doing the converting all the values to annual, nothing else, no, nothing more. Let's read this example and see it from here. New digital scanning graphics equipment is expected to cost 20,000 to be used for 3 years and to have an annual operating cost 8,000. Determine the annual worth values for 1 and 2 life cycle with a given interest rate is 22% per year. Okay, now we see that it says a life cycle, and the life cycle we used to do it is repeating all the values given in the first cycle and the second to the second cycle or to the third cycle or to any given cycles needed in the question. So we draw at the beginning, the first step you do in answering this question is you draw these values for the given cycle. The given cycle was 3 years in the question, and the first cost when it says expected to cost, that means it's the initial cost or the first cost that comes on time 0, which is the 20,000. And then the annual operating cost, which is the 8,000, is going to be last for 3 years. There is no salvage in this question as we used to do or used to have. This is just basically because the example was including a salvage. Okay, so we draw the cash flow for 3 years from 0 to 3, and we post all those values on the cash flow, and we write them here. The 20,000 is an outflow. Also the 8,000, actually it's all of them is outflow. So the 8,000 is from 1 to 3, and then the 20,000 is the 20,000 here. This is related to the second cycle. So for the first cycle, you just draw the cash flow and you stop until year 3 with the 8,000, and this 20,000 is not given in the first cycle. But if you want to draw another cycle, which means you are going to repeat the values as we used to do in chapter 5, we are going to repeat all the values given again in another 3 years period, starting from year 3 to year 6. So at year 3, again, the initial cost will place as a 20,000, and the annual is going to be 8,000 per from the year 4 until year 6. If there was a salvage given in this question, if there is a salvage, then the salvage will be placed usually, as we said before, it is going to be at the end of the period. So it will be at year 3 as the inflow, the arrow to up, and then it's going to be repeated again on year 6 as an arrow inflow to up. And as you can see, the 20,000 is not repeated in year 6 because there is no third life cycle, or there is no third cycle in this question. It was only 2 cycle, so the 20,000 only be placed at the beginning of the cycle, not at the end, but the salvage placed at the end of each cycle. Okay. طيب. In this question, ask you the first time to find the annual for 1 cycle and then for the 2 cycle. For the first one, which is the 1 cycle, we will convert all the values as we agreed to annual worth format. And to do so, we need only to convert the 20,000, which was given as a present, and we need to convert it to annual. And in this case, the formulation for the annual from the present will be A given P, because the present was given as a 20,000 and A is needed to be found, multiplied with the 20,000 with the minus sign, and don't forget the sign because now we are dealing with the outflow or a cost. Okay, and the percentage will be 22 as given, and the number of years is given for the cycle as a 3,000 minus 8,000, which is here, and there is no need for converting because it is already in annual format. We used to do the vice versa in chapter 5. We used to deal with the 20,000 with no converting, and the annual we converted to present. But here in this case, it is the opposite. The annual no need to convert it, and the present need to be converted to an annual. After you add them up, you will get the annual worth, which will be minus 17,793 and 16 hundredths per year. Okay, for the 2 life cycle, which is the second part of this question, then you will deal with the cash flow from year 0 until year 6. And in this case, also we are going to convert all these values to annual. Now, the annual is already given the 8,000. There is no need for converting, and we will use it and place it as is minus 8,000. But for the 20,000 to convert it to annual, now we have a 6 years life instead of 3. So we do the same formulation, A given P, but for 6 years. And again, for the 20,000 here, we cannot convert it to annual for the whole cash flow as it is placed in the middle or shifted from time 0. So we have to return it to time 0 by using the converting present given future, because it's a single value placed on year 3. So we convert it to year 0 first, and then we convert it from year 0 to annual for all the 6 years as it is given in the second bracket. And then that will be the annual worth for the 2 life cycle. So far, is it clear? There is any questions before we move on?
Professor, the initial
Yes,
is
Ahmed.
the third year, right?
تفضل.
الله يديك العافيه دكتور. بالنسبه للثانيه ليش حولنا من قلنا present given to future؟
Okay, the question is asking about for the second life cycle for the 20,000 that placed on year 3, why we are using P given F 22% for 3 years and we didn't do P given A directly. Why? Because if we place P given A, and the value was placed on year 3, then you either going to go to the right for 3 years or you are going to find to the left for another 3 years. Now, if you are also calculating for a 6 years, that means is for the 6 years starting from year 3, which is not correct because the 6 years is not going to be from year 3 until year 9 or from year 3 until minus, there is no, but minus year 3, because now when we calculate, we want to find the annual for 6 years, we want to find the annual in the given cash flow, which is from year 1 to year 6, and we cannot, there is no way to convert something in the middle, or even if it was on year 1 to all the cash flow for 6 years. So you have to find it as a single value at the either at the end of the cash flow on year 6 or at the beginning of the cash flow at year 0, and then from there you can go and find it on the all coming years in the cash flow. So again, the 20,000 was placed on year 3, and the converting from present to annual, it required from us to find this at year 0. Or if you want to convert it from future to annual, we have to convert it to year 6 first, and then we find the annual. But finding the annual for 6 years while you are in year 3, that means you are not covering the exact period that's given in the question here. You are covering additional 3 years than the one you have on the cash flow, because this value was placed on year 3, not year 0 or year 6. تفضل صالح.
دكتور البداية من السنة 0 صح؟ مو 3. ألو.
Okay. Salih, did I get the question correct? Just correct me if I'm wrong. Is it always to have the 20,000 from year 0?
دكتور ما أدري سامعني ولا؟
دحين سامع.
تمام. البداية من سنة 0 ولا سنة 3؟
البداية no. When we want to find the annual for the cash flow, you either to go to year 0 or to year 6. يعني how I find annual from a value that is placed in the middle. Remember chapter 2. What we used to do in the annual, when we have a value in the middle or even on year 2 or year 1, we have to return it to year 0 and then we find the annual for the whole cash flow. Or you move it to the future, to the end of the cash flow, and then find the annual from year 6 or in the future year to the back to the cash flow. صالح, is it clear?
تمام. يعني أي طريقة عاد تضبط. تمام.
Yes, عبد الصمد. Someone is asking, the 20,000 in year 3 that's converted in the question, we converted all the values. What about the the previous 20,000, the 20,000 placed on year 0. Didn't we convert it here? We converted in the first part of the question and in the second part. Any value that is not an annual need to be converted to annual. This is to make it easier and answer all the questions coming. As in chapter 5, we used to convert all the values to present because they were not placed as a present except for the initial cost. If we have a salvage in year 3, we are going to deal with it as we dealt with the 20,000. We have to convert it to year 0 and then we find the annual from there. Or to convert it to year 6 and then we find the annual from year 6. But any value that is not annual need to be converted to an annual. The chapter name is annual worth. So any value in the cash flow has to be in an annual format. If it was not, it has to be converted to do so. And how we convert it, refer to chapter 2, how we convert the values from present to annual or from future to annual. Okay, there was someone wanted to ask a question. Someone raised his hand. Abdul Karim, تفضل.
Doctor, why the second life cycle started at year 3, not 4? سامعني دكتور؟
Yes, I got your question. The question is asking why the second cycle started at year 3, not year 4. I will ask you a question. Why the first cycle was started at year 0, not year 1?
لأنها هي البداية. يعني
And this is also the beginning.
تمام يعطيك العافية.
Yes, okay. The beginning is where is the first cycle end. Go back to chapter 5 when we did the LCM example. Refer to that part in chapter 5. The LCM example, when we used to do more than 2 cycles, we used to start when the previous cycle ends. So if the first cycle ends at year 3, then the second cycle starts also at year 3. Okay? Refer to chapter 5, the LCM part. We have done also some examples. Moving on, any questions before we move on? Now a new concept will come. So, okay, I'm going to move on unless if someone has a question. Now, the annual worth is calculated by converting all the values to annual. All the values given, future value, present value, we convert them all to an annual to get the annual worth analysis. Okay, what about this equation that giving and says the annual worth, it is equal to CR plus A. What is the CR? CR is capital recovery. I will explain what is capital recovery. Plus the A of annual operating cost, which is capital recovery. We can read it this way: capital recovery plus the annual operating cost. Okay, why is the capital recovery? And we used to just convert the values all to annual. No need to name things and no need to have clustering in those values. The reason of that is because the capital recovery, it is very important component in the annual worth equation and need to be found separately to make decisions sometimes. And to tell you the truth, it is one of the must questions in my exams for the chapter 6. So capital recovery is one of the things that's very important, and I always bring questions to calculate it in addition to calculate the annual worth. Let's explain what is the capital recovery. The capital recovery, it's basically the annual amount needed to recover the initial investment. Write this down. Is the equal annual amount needed to recover the initial investment. It is excluding the annual operating cost. طيب, to explain this an example, give you an example and pay attention now, okay? Don't let things distract you. Pay attention now to what I'm going to give as an example to explain to you the capital recovery. You are going to purchase a car using a leasing option. Leasing option اللي هو النظام التأجيري أو نظام الأقساط, okay? You went to the bank and you have signed the lease or contract, okay? And you are going to pay installments per year, okay? Those installments is exactly to recover the initial investment or the initial purchase from the bank, which is the cost of that car. After 3 or 5 years, you are going to recover from the initial investment, because what is the bank is going to do is going to pay, let's say, Toyota or Ford or Mazda or any another company the amount of that car, and you are going to pay it in installments. That installments you are going to pay monthly, it is capital recovery, because to recover from it is equal amount paid periodically to recover the initial cost or the initial investment with respect to the interest rate given. Okay, what about the operating cost? Now, does the bank pay you to go and do your oil change? Does the bank pay you to go and change your tires? Does the bank pay you to change your car battery? No, right? So in this case, the annual operating cost is excluded in the concept of the capital recovery. The capital recovery only, it's a fixed amount, you pay it periodically, regardless if it's yearly or monthly, to recover from the initial investment or the initial cost. In addition to the salvage. إيش معنى السالفج in the car example? At the end of the lease, you didn't want to pay اللي هو last payment اللي هي الدفعة المتأخرة, okay? And you ask the bank, I'm going to return the car. I'm going to return the car to you. So that payment will be dropped from you in that case. So that payment considered to be like a salvage. It is inflow considered to you and outflow considered to the bank. So the capital recovery, it is the annual commitment you are going to commit, or anyone going to commit, whether a company or a bank, to recover from the initial investment or the initial cost, in addition to the salvage if it was exist. Some examples the salvage is not exist, but in some examples yes, there is a salvage, so the salvage considered in that case. But the annual operating cost, it is excluded in the concept of the capital recovery. So that's why the capital recovery equation, it is to flow or consider the present, which is the initial cost, and the salvage, which is the plus or the inflow, and converting both of them to annual format, definitely, because it is related to annual worth technique. Is it clear, the capital recovery, or there is a questions? And as you can see in the last statement, the capital recovery does not include annual operating cost. Okay, let's take question. صالح تفضل.
دكتور معلش بس عيد آخر شيء قلته في التعريف إنه to recover شيء قلته.
To recover the initial investment or the first cost. Repeating, it's already recorded, so you can go to the recorded session and you can hear it over and over. But I mean, if the concept was not clear, I will explain it. I mean, if there is something that is not clear, to recover from the initial investment or the first cost with equal amount that paid periodically with respect to the interest rate, and the salvage value, that is exactly the capital recovery. دفعات متساوية للتعافي من المبلغ الابتدائي باعتبار النسبة حقة الربح والمبلغ حق السالفج اللي هو اتفقنا عليه مبدئيا. تفضل.
إذا تكرمت يا دكتور الآن the CR it can be including the annual in some situation and some situation it can be. صارت يعني حالات وحالات حسب السؤال اللي يواجهني.
لا the capital recovery first, let's agree it is annual format. So when you find the capital recovery, the value it is per year. It is per year. تمام? Good. So the equation here, you are finding the annual because the formulation says A given P. You are converting the initial cost to annual. And the salvage, you are converting future to annual. But the thing that is not included in the capital recovery, the last sentence, CR does not include annual what? Operating cost. سعر الصيانة. Remember the car example. الشركة بتدفع لك، البنك بيدفع لك سعر الغيار الزيت، سعر تغيير البطارية، سعر الكفرات، ما بيدفع لك ده. You pay it. بيدفع لك سعر أقساط السيارة. صح ولا لا؟ I mean أقساط السيارة أنت بتدفعها للمبلغ الأساسي حق السيارة اللي هو البنك already pay it to the company. هو okay, now if the provider, the bank who provided that amount, then you are going to pay it annually or monthly in this case to the bank. The bank, the capital recovery for them is the amount you pay every month, okay, to recover from the amount they have paid for your car. البنك دفع لي شركة السيارات واشترى سيارة اللي انت تمتلكها، انت بتدفع لهم شهريا so they recover from that initial cost اللي هم دفعوه لسيارتك ابتدائيا. clear يا أحمد؟ all the others, is it clear؟ طيب the meaning of the capital recovery, it is very important. This is a must question. Again, I'm repeating that. And the question usually is not about يعني, to memorize. It is really understanding the meaning, because you will be asked to find a value, and after that value you will make decision, and that decision will show that whether you understood the concept of the capital recovery or not. So understanding the concept is very important, and I can explain it over and over until it's very crystal clear to everyone. Okay, so let's take an example and see after the example if there is still some questions or any questions raised after the example. Okay, the example here, it says capital recovery is the equivalent annual amount A to recover 13 million. So asking to find the capital recovery for initial cost, that is 13 million, and the I is given as a 12%, and the salvage is 0.5 million after 8 years. So the number of years for that project is 8, and the salvage is 0.5 million. Pay attention, it's 0.5 million, is not $0.5, and the initial cost is 13 million. So if we go back to the formula of the capital recovery, imagine if this question, now just يعني, hold a second, imagine this question is including annual operating cost 300,000 per year and ask you to find the capital recovery, you do not include that in your solution if you are going to calculate the capital recovery. But if the question asks to find the annual worth, not the capital recovery, then you are going to include the operating cost. Okay, now in this question there was no operating cost and asking about the capital recovery. So to find the capital recovery, the first cost 13 million by minus A given P because it is placed in year 0 for the number of years 8 plus the 0.5 million A given F because it's placed on year 8 in the future. The value 2.576 million per year. Now this green box here, read it carefully, and that's what I mean in explaining your answer after you find the numerical value at the end of the question. The project must develop revenue of at least this amount you just found to recover initial cost, which is the 13 million, and make 12% on the investment. So to recover the 13 million with respect to the 12% per year, you need to develop, لازم يكون عندك أرباح per year تعادل minimum 2.57 minimum. If it is more, then you are making profit. If it is less, then you are below to recover that investment within the 18 years, with the 8 years, not 18 years. Okay? If it is exactly, then you will recover from the initial investment of that 13 million with 8 years. واضح, clear? ايش تمثل الارتفاع في السنة 8؟ the Samad, can you take the mic? Explain. Now you are asking about the salvage or asking about the initial, the interest. What about the 0.5? Yeah, the 0.5, this is salvage, and that salvage, we exclude that initial cost from it. That's why we have it as a positive, because consider to be, if you want to recover within the 8 years, you still can exclude that part. In the case if you want to just get rid of that project, you can still have the 0.5 million back to you minus from the 13 of the initial investment. Yes, Ahmed, excellent question. Good question from Ahmed. Is the green box here considered to be evaluating? Now, recalling in chapter 1, engineering economy, you have said we cover 3 functions: formulating, evaluating, estimating. And exactly, Ahmed, this is excellent. This is evaluation, and this is the most important part, because you can do good formulation, you can do calculations, but which is the estimation, but you don't know really what does those numbers represent. And this part where you as an engineer need to learn is not just solving problems, you need to know how to evaluate the values after you find them. So exactly, yes, that's evaluating. Okay. Umar is asking why the value it is minus. Okay, because this is, you are considering the first cost as a minus, and we don't know what is the revenue you are going to make. So it is going to be with a minus at the end. But then when you apply it to your real life, you have to know, يعني, you paid 13 million. Imagine you paid 13 million. When how much I need to make every year or every month is going to be calculated based on the 13 million that I have paid, which is minus already. So when I find it here by minus, because it is already paid, it is in the initial cost, and I have to just consider that without the minus, this is the amount needed to recover from the initial investment, because the initial investment was minus, not plus. Umar, clear? Not subtracting. No, the only thing that we are subtracting, which is the salvage, in case if the project is going to be at the end cancelled, or you want to return that car I have gave you in the example, you still can have that amount at the end of the project, which is part of your initial investment, so we have to exclude it. دفعت 13 مليون وفي السنة 8 قررت انك انت تلغي البروجكت ده ولا تصفيه، طلع لك منه نص مليون. طيب النص هذه if it is not exactly was part of the 13 you already paid at the beginning, it is. So that's why we exclude it. When you want to return the car at the end of the lease and there was still payment was due on you to the bank, those payments considered to be salvage, because you are not going to pay them, and it was part of the initial cost of the lease when you signed it out. صح ولا لا؟ Okay, so let's move on. Now here is the part where most students do mistakes. Please pay attention. If the question asks you to find the annual worth, then you find the capital recovery plus the annual operating cost, which is convert everything you see in the cash flow to annual worth. But if the question asks you to find the capital recovery only, pay attention to what is calculated, need to be converted, and what is not. So it was annual operating cost, you don't convert it in the question. So for example, a project estimated annual operating cost 0.9 million each year. I believe this question is already has a remaining part in the textbook. So yeah, for the previous project, he means for this project. Okay, imagine if you have an annual operating cost which is 0.9. What is the annual operating cost? You already found the capital recovery. You will add the annual operating cost, which is the 0.9. No need to convert it because it is annual already, and no need for converting of the annual to another annual. So it will be added to the capital recovery, and that will be the annual worth for that project. But if I ask you to find the capital recovery only, you do not include the 0.9 million, even if it was included in the question. Okay? So the common mistake comes in this part of chapter 6, come from 3 common mistakes. First one, student calculate capital recovery including annual operating cost. Student calculate annual worth as it is capital recovery and does not including annual operating cost. Student don't know what is the interpretation. Interpretation mean المعنى of capital recovery when it is found at the end So he make an explanation or evaluation about that status of that value. So those 3 common mistakes from my experience students they do in chapter 6, try please to avoid them and pay attention to them when you take your exam. تفضل يا فيصل. Yes, Faisal. Why we added 0.9 with a negative value? Anyone can answer Faisal's question here. Why we add in this slide 0.9 as a minus sign? Anyone? Because yes, thank you Saleh, Imad. Because it is cost. It is annual cost. The cost we add it with a minus sign. Only revenue or salvage we add it as plus sign. طيب. This is a question says Lockheed Martin is increasing its booster thrust power in order to win more satellite launch contracts from European companies interested in new global communication market. Usually these type of statements يعني just to give you an introduction about the problem يعني don't let them really take from your time. Try to focus on when the number started and try to know the inferences of each number. What does it mean? So if we just go to the first number when it says require an investment of 13 million, that's mean initial cost investment اللي انت بتدفع الادخار at the beginning. So 13 million. Annual operating cost for the system expected to start the first year and continue. So the annual operating cost بيبدأ for year 1 and continue for 0.9 million per year. Okay. The useful life of that tracker is 8 years with a salvage is 0.5 million. Calculate the annual worth value for the system. I will leave you this question because it's basically it is similar to the first example we have covered in chapter 6 before the capital recovery, because here there is no capital recovery. It is similar, converting all these values to annual worth by just converting the salvage to annual and the initial cost to annual. The 900,000 is already annual. You don't need to convert it, but just pay attention. The 500,000 is plus sign, and those 900,000 and 13 millions will be with a minus sign. And here is the formulation. And also, I believe it is asked you here in the second part, or I think it is an additional, that the capital recovery was calculated. But anyway, I want you to try this example by yourself without looking to the answer. Just try to look to the problem here, even without the cash flow, because the cash flow is not given to you in the questions, and try to solve it yourself. And then, inshallah, in the next class, if you have any questions about this example, or in chapter 6, we can discuss it also to save the time for and the other examples, which is including more than one alternative. If you have a single project and you have to decide whether to go or no go with that project, you have to calculate the annual worth first, and you see if it is greater or equal to 0, then you can just say it is justified and you can go with that project. For multiple projects, and you can go with the one that is numerically largest, has numerically largest annual worth value. In this case, if it is less negative or more positive. I will give you just 1 or 2 minutes to look at the example here, and then we will continue with the explanation of that example. Okay, now let's discuss the solution. And as we said in chapter 6, there is no need for LCM, even though the life of each alternative, it is different than the other. In alternative X or project X, the number of years is 5, and Y, it has 6. If this question was related to chapter 5, then we used to do either LCM to find the least common multiple, or to use study period. But in this chapter 6, in the annual worth, you don't do that. You just solve the problem for X for 4 years and solve it for Y for 6 years. The initial cost for X is 40,000, 75 for Y. Annual operating cost, life years, the salvage value was given in the table, and ask you to select among those two one of them. So we convert all these values to annual operating cost. No need to convert it. That's why you see them here at the end of the equation in the blue. No converted needed, or no formulation needed for conversion. But for the 40,000 or the 75,000, you do A given P because it's the first cost. And for the salvage, it is A given F as a future cost with a plus sign. Pay attention to the sign when you do the formulation. At the end, we found the annual worth is 36,000 for X and 32,000 for Y with a minus sign. And in this case, we select Y because it is the largest numerical value among those two, and we selected as the option or the most economical alternative. Questions? Okay. This is an explanation of the question again. Another example here. The example says a company that want to evaluate two similar prices or two alternatives, and they gave you the information about each alternative with the interest rate is 12%. And the question asks you the first time to use the annual worth method, and the second time use the annual worth but with a study period. Okay, so this is the first time you see the study period in chapter 6. We used to see it in chapter 5. So here it is in chapter 6. So part A is similar to the same that we have covered in the previous example. But here what you to pay attention in the table, those two values. The salvage value, which is the $10,000 for X and 7,000 for Y. And the estimated value after 3 years. The estimated values after 3 years, 14,000 for X and 20,000 for Y. What is this difference between that and the salvage? And what is the meaning of estimated value after 3 years? When you use the part B, the study period, you consider the salvage. Remember this note I was mentioning in chapter 5. I said pay attention to the salvage. The salvage in the study period, sometimes it is given separately. As in this example, the salvage for the study period 3 years was given as you see it in the last row. So you neglect the salvage for the whole period when you do the study period for 3 years. And you neglect the salvage for the 3 years when you do part A for the whole period. We will see the solution Let's see part A. Part A, when you convert all these values to annual, you convert the 40,000 to annual using minus sign A given P for 4 years because N equals 4. And the 25,000 no converted needed because it is annual operating cost. The salvage value, and pay attention now, we use the 10,000, we didn't use the 14,000. Why? Because now we are calculating for the annual worth for the whole period, okay? And for Y, the same thing, the 75,000 for the first cost, A given P, the minus 15,000, and also we use the 7,000, we didn't use the 20,000 because it was for the whole period. Pay attention, the number of years is 6, we use it as is for each alternative as it is given in the question. And now in this case we use or select Y because it is less, larger numerically. It is minus 32,000 compared to A, which is minus 36. For part B, now I want you to focus on the salvage here. The salvage used 14,000 and the 10,000 was not used. Why? Because the salvage for that study period was given in the question. If it was not given, if it was given here, this row, then you will use the given value, the 10,000. But since it is given, the salvage for the study period, use the salvage for the study period when you do the study period technique and you neglect the other salvage value. And in this case, the equipment X, it was better option compared to Y. It is different than part A when it was Y better than X. This is because it was used for a shorter time, and this case was X more economical than Y. Like it seems to be Y needed more time to recover from the investment and to be better than X for a longer period because it will be for 6 years compared to X, which is 4 years. Okay, do you have questions so far? Any questions? No? Okay, good. Before we move to the last part, which is the permanent investment, the permanent investment is capitalized cost, and we have covered it in chapter 5. We will cover it again in chapter 6. As we said before, it is going to be repeated, but since it is a separate concept than what we just covered today, I want you to go and practice those examples at home, and in addition to the examples in the textbook. And inshallah, in the next lecture, we will go to recap about chapter 6 again and continue and complete chapter 6 in next lecture, which is only have remained the permanent investment or the capitalized cost, which will just be one example. So please, if you have questions, let's answer them today, and also we will talk about the exam in a few, but just let us close the recording since the coming material is not related to the